Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Welcome to Paul's Money Market Update number 207 for Monday, 8th of December 2025. Hope you're all well. Hope you've enjoyed a good weekend. Hope you're enjoying a start to the kind of Christmas season. As always, you are. It's great to have you here with us. If you're joining us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is just that. It is me flying through as much as I can squeeze in the next 30 minutes, looking at strength and weakness within the FX markets, looking at charts of interest that you might want to sort of add to your watch list, and then a look at the live markets. As always, you're very welcome here, but just remember you are always responsible for your own trading and investing decisions. And if you want a bit more sort of education this afternoon, I'll be running the Active Trades Monday Market Matters webinar at 2 o'clock London time. Today's educational element will be looking at sort of an introduction to sort of basic smart money concepts in trading. You're very welcome to join us. You can do so either on the register on the Active Trades website or using the QR code there. And just a reminder that I'll be working with 5 people next year in terms of a trader mentorship to develop disciplined, effective, and consistent and successful traders. If you're interested in that, then either ping me or you can use that QR code. Okay, more importantly, let us have a look at the markets, okay, and what's going on. So I appreciate that this might well be, if you're new to trading or new to joining us, maybe it looks a little bit sort of complex, okay, or a little bit intimidating, but it's not really. It's just pieces out of my own model that sort of I complete at the weekends, just in an effort to give me an idea of where's the strength, where's the weakness within FX indices and commodities markets, because I find that when I have an understanding of that, well, then I'm better able to use my time, energy, and resources during the week in terms of how I'd look to sort of trade and manage myself. So what is this telling us? How is this helping us? So here we are. We are into week 50 of the year, ladies and gentlemen, for 8th of December. Where's the strength? Where's the weakness? Well, the Aussie strength that we have seen recently has maintained itself, and it still keeps us there, Aussie, at top of the pile. And Euro is basically still managing to hold itself into second place. A good part of that is because, as we see, Swiss franc continues to sort of weaken. We've had the US dollar really kind of sort of fall away. Now, of course, remember, ladies and gentlemen, that this is quite a big week for central bankers. So we have we've got sort of overnight into tomorrow. We've got the Royal Bank of Australia, their rate statement at the moment. They're not expecting a change. Wednesday, you've got the Bank of Canada. They've got their rate statement at the moment. People aren't expecting a change there. And on Thursday, you have the Swiss National Bank. Okay, they've got their policy rate. And once again, it's not expected to change. But Wednesday evening, okay, we have the FOMC. That's the kind of main one that everyone will be focusing on. All right, 7 o'clock London time, and there we are expecting, an interest rate cut, okay, from 25 basis points, 0.25% from 4 down to 3.75. Okay, that's what people are expecting. Most people have baked that in. I think what will happen is it'll be interesting to see what happens in the statement and the press conference afterwards in terms of the sort of direction of travel for the Federal Reserve in 2026. But that kind of all has its own little impact. As I said, Aussie dollar has basically, kind of pushed its way up there and maintains itself at the top of the STAM. If you've got basically, the US and the UK, looking to cut interest rates, whereas the Aussies, well, they're actually talking about, their next move might be a hike. Okay, and they're already at what I think it's a 3.6, 3.5, 3.6. The Australian dollar, well, then invariably that just sort of gives credence to that strength v weakness, namely sort of Aussie pushing its way to the top, whereas kind of dollar and sterling are sort of basically just in the kind of lower part of the STAM. Certainly, last week was an interesting week for sterling. You had, of course, the week before that, you'd had the autumn statement, and then there was a lot of the shenanigans about how the chancellor had misled the House, the markets, and the public, and that was led by the former head of the OBR, who was forced to resign before he was supposed to go into Parliament and make a statement about that. And then, strangely enough, the new person that was appointed was very quick to sort of say that the Chancellor had not misled anybody, and in doing so, that kind of took the put the story to bed. And actually, what we saw was, especially on Wednesday, we saw a really strong sterling move there, really strong sterling move and stuff. And so which was fascinating to see. But then it came out this morning that basically last week we had the Japanese were buying lots of gilts, which is what's kind of probably had the that impact there. So the tangled webs we weave. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the state of Japanese government bonds, okay, and those yields there at the highest they've been in 20 years. Um, and we know we still see kind of gilt yields and also the US Treasuries. All right, there is still a lot of shenanigans and skullduggery going on in there. Okay, and of course that is having a knock-on impact into these into FX markets that we particularly are looking at. What we're seeing is Kiwi dollar, okay, is starting to strengthen a little bit. Canadian dollar, okay, is still sat holding it in third place. Japanese yen is still firmly at the bottom, even though what we have is we've got Mr. Ueda from the Bank of Japan speaking tomorrow. Pretty much most people are expecting them to actually raise rates this month. Okay, that's the general consensus at the moment, and invariably we will all be intrigued to see how that impacts markets itself. Okay, so there is lots going on. All right, this is going to be a busy week. There's plenty going on there. It's kind of interesting that this morning, is actually all right. We can interestingly see that yen and Swiss franc were the weakest, which is normally an indication of a risk on sort of mentality. But as you can see, a little bit of thin in terms of the movement because, as I said, lots of central bankers and the FOMC in particular on Wednesday, and that's what I think you'll find most particular traders are looking for. With regards to the UK, what we had was a few weeks ago. Okay, it's kind of a very mixed picture, and in fact, all sort of selling. But actually, what you can see now is that there's a bit of a turn, and there's a bit of a there's a little bit of a how would I describe it? A kind of mixed picture. We can see that sterling is in buying environments against the dollar, the yen, and the Swiss franc, but okay, is in a selling environment, okay, against the com dollars, Aussie, Kiwi, and Canadian dollar there, okay. That's probably giving us just a little bit of an indication of an overall bigger shift. But we'll look at that in the live markets in a moment. What we are also looking at in case of the when it comes to the looking at indices and commodities, what we've seen is that we had quite a few of them that had been in sort of tactical selling environments, but they've come out of that. A lot of that is to do with the kind of bullish moves we've seen on some of those, in particular American stocks, but American indexes, okay, but also the other DAX as well, which we'll look at in a moment. And so, we just see that, ASX, okay, is still in a bit of a kind of a tactical short, but oil is tactical long. Silver is still a strategic buy, which we talked about last week. Interestingly, the VIX is now kind of very bullish, but Bitcoin remains kind of bearish. But I think quite a few of the crypto bros are happy that it hasn't. That Bitcoin hasn't collapsed as many were fearing, but we'll look at that in a moment. So, as I said, lots going on this week. Okay, so make sure you're on top of the your news flow. Okay, make sure you're on top of the order flow and managing risk as always. Okay, let's have a look at the charts of interest. So these are always just a few charts that I put up. Okay, normally weekly charts that, as I said, might be just charts of interest, might be a learning point. Okay, might be a setup, might be you just want to add it to your watch list. So this is Broadcom, okay, but their ticker is AVGO, and they are they're a company, kind of an interesting company because they are positioned in AI infrastructure, but whereas the likes of Nvidia, etc., are mostly just focused on the chips. Broadcom is a bit more diverse in terms of it's both chips and software. It's not just a chip maker. They also build and sell infrastructure software, okay, for For a kind of a networking gear tailored for sort of data centers, of course, which is, there is a huge boom going on in there at the moment. So actually, what you can see is it's no surprise that this on the weekly chart has been such a fantastic trend, hasn't it? That has been a really good trend. Yep. Okay. We had a really strong pullback there. Okay. Earlier in the year, but that was the Trump tariff. So, everybody had a pullback there, didn't they? But it kind of finished with a really nice bullish engulfing key reversal candle, recapturing the 50-period moving average, and we've not really looked back since. And what we saw the last week or two was that we got up to sort of tickling the soft underbelly of $400. We had a really strong couple of weeks there, a couple of weeks ago. Last week is a bit of an inside bar bullish pin bar. As I said, some people might look at that as a bit of a bit of a hanging man, and the reason I look at it is, we haven't looked at this for a good while, but clearly it's been in a great trend. Clearly, some for those of you like your classical technical analysis, a couple of really nice flag patterns, bullish flag patterns as that goes up. But I think we also have we've got earnings on Thursday. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's Thursday of this week that'll be coming in, and so naturally people will be looking to see whether there continues to be an acceleration in AI-driven revenue and bookings. Okay, for that, that's what people will be watching to see. That they'll be wanting to see if those kind of big AI firms, big cloud giants, etc., if they're still spending money on AI infrastructure. Okay, that's what people will be interested, because if they aren't, then that is a bit of a canary in the coal mine, I suspect. So people will be acutely interested in what these guys how what earnings these guys deliver later on this week and stuff. So listen, the chart is bullish, okay, and it has been, but I'd be looking to see, well, if we get bullish numbers, does that push us above 400 and to hold, or if there is a kind of, as I said, a canary in the coal mine and a kind of a hint of a weakening in clients spending, does that then basically look as sort of falling away to suggesting to about that kind of $340 area? And that's what I'll be looking at there with AVGO. Next one. This is a monthly chart of MANU. Okay, Manchester United. So I have, I have in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a Manchester United fan, all right, and I put these up because these guys, they have also got their earnings this week on Thursday. Um, this is the monthly chart because actually what you can probably see is that for the good part, right, of the majority of the last few years, what we've had is we've had a sort of base there at sort of $12 to $13, and we've kind of peaked out there around about $26, haven't we, for most of the month, and at the moment we're kind of trading down here, sort of kind of $15. The share price is about as moribund as their team performances are at this particular moment. So Manchester United are playing Wolves tonight. Okay, so the managers are under increasing pressure, despite the board. Okay, and Ineos, the part owners, saying they have full faith in him and they're looking for 3 years. But I think many people will be interested to see how the team play against Wolves this evening. Wolves, I don't think they've won a game all season yet. I don't think they've scored even goals for like about 7 or 8 games and stuff. So watch Manchester United turn them into 1970s World Cup Brazil. That's how United are playing the last few weeks, etc. So all of that kind of lack of confidence in the manager and the team, does have an impact, I believe, on the share price. I am a Manchester United sport. I don't own any Man U stock, okay, and I can't imagine, in the present circumstances, why I particularly want to own any, etc. Just making the Glazers richer doesn't exactly fill me with a great excitement, but once again, I'll be interested to see what the kind of earnings report is like on Thursday. I think it's Thursday. It's later this week, and to see whether they are trying to effectively distract people with good off the field performance in terms of commercial revenues to make up for the kind of on field poor overall quality that we are seeing in the particular team. So my own personal opinion is that the job is probably a bit too big for Amarin. I think he is fearful, and he is making very negative decisions and choices, and people can see that, they can pick up on that. And I think, you might be saying that, share prices are a reflection of human psychology, and if we can all see that, well, then maybe that also has an implication in terms of why the MANU share price is also kind of depressed. It is reflecting the psychology of most of its supporters at the moment. So let's see what those numbers are like out. Let's see if United can actually manage to squeeze their way past Wolves, or as I said, we've been so rubbish, we'll lose to them and then turn Wolves into prime Barcelona. So anyway, you can see how I'm going to be spending my evening, and it'll probably be miserable. Anyway, there you go, Man United. Look at that. And then finally, okay, final one for today, before we look at the live charts, BA, all right, British Aerospace Systems. Those of you who joined have joined for a long time will know that, I have a particular interest, okay, in aerospace and defense companies. We've talked about, over the sort of weeks and years, how certainly since the beginning of conflict in Ukraine, how that has been effectively immensely good for defense companies, both European and US. But we talked a couple of weeks ago about here we can see that we'd passed like £2,000, all right, in terms of the sort of the chart price there, and we talked about a bit of a nice evening star there, false breakout, I'd call that, and we talked about how the continuing conversations between sort of Trump and Putin, and to a lesser part Zelensky, about possible peace plan for Ukraine was likely to take the kind of wind out of the sails of defense companies, and that is what we've seen, and we've seen that both in sort of European and US defense companies. And I'm kind of interested now because actually over the last week or two, you can see is that we've closed beneath this 50-period moving average. All right, last week we had a little bit of a momentum reversal kind of, but we still couldn't get above the 50 there. So the thing I'm interested in is, of course, is what we see. I think it's in London today. Zelensky is now meeting with STAM, Merz, and Macron. I couldn't think of a worse way to spend my afternoon than be in a room with those three miserable sods. But anyway, the less said about Paul's middle-aged man rants, the better. But my own view, as I've said before, is that quite a few politically, Merz, Macron, and STAM are all doing pretty poorly domestically, and a little bit of fighting and conflict on the eastern edges of the sort of European land continent. Okay, might be a nice little distraction from as I said, from domestic issues at home. So as I've said before, my fear, and I'm very happy and I'm very willingly to be proven wrong on this, is that I worry that those three are going to do a bit of a President Galtieri, as in Argentina '82, in a way and a means to basically sort of distract people. But we will see what kind of the rhetoric comes out of that meeting today, and of course, most importantly, what, if any, impact that has on the on European defence company, in particular British Aerospace. So I could see that there's an incident or an event, and basically it pumps price up to that kind of 1800 area there, and that to me would then be a decision point. Okay, does it basically reject? In which case, I think we're down to 1500 there. Okay, that's what I'd be looking. Or is there just generally a kind of a continuous sort of pump towards war? In which case, then I'd be expecting us to head back to those big round numbers of 2000. So yeah, let's see how that kind of plays out over the next couple of weeks. All right, so that's the charts of interest for this week. Let's switch across to the live markets and see what's going on. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment, we'll switch across and see what the score is. Okay, so I hope you can still hear me. Hope you can see me. What have we here? Okay, this is one of my platforms. Okay, it's one of my kind of indices and commodities. And what I've got here is I've got the Dow on the weekly, NASDAQ on the weekly, S&P 500 on the weekly. The Russell there is on the monthly. FTSE on the weekly, Nikkei on the weekly, DAX on the weekly, and oil on the weekly there. Okay. So what I'm going to particularly focus on is last week we looked at the monthly candles, didn't we? And the Russell there, I was talking about how is this kind of a momentum supporting pin bar, or is it a hanging man? Well, actually what we can see is that last week, okay, we've had a pretty strong follow through, and it might be said on the weekly charts, okay, for the last week or two, you can see that on those American indexes, we have had a little bit of a strong pullback. And as I said, I think part of that is I think is as the 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 probability of an interest rate cut on Wednesday has increased. That has had an impact in benefit some of those markets, but equally, I think if we get a comments from Mr. Powell about the kind of trajectory for next year, and it could be somewhere between 2 to 3 cuts. And also the fact that his replacement is deemed to be very dovish, okay, and very keen to cut rates. That's why Trump will probably get him in there. That could be interpreted as being positive for stocks, okay, certainly in the short term. And I would start to wonder whether, well, actually, could that give people the Santa rally they were looking for to take us to finish the year at those highs? So, as I said, going to be an interesting week, okay, and I'll be looking to see what the statement comes out. What's the statement, and also what's the conference afterwards, to see what impact that has in terms of whether we get a continuation of this last couple of weeks, a little bit of a bump higher. So that's what we'll be looking and working at. A bit closer to home, we talked a couple of weeks ago about the DAX. This is DAX on the weekly chart, and I'd said about how really for months we'd just really been in this kind of this corridor here, this kind of sideways consolidation. But we were at an area where I was looking to see we were going to make a decision. We were at the bottom end of the corridor, bottom end of the consolidation, also the 50-period moving average, which has acted as support. Okay, the last couple of times we've been down there, and you can see like those American stocks. Okay, and the DAX has had that similar impact as well. Okay, it's bounced off there. We're at the back up into the 20, which is going sideways. And so now we're looking, we're in the middle of that range. Okay, do we get the kind of news that will basically help pump DAX back up to those highs, and to maybe, like those American indices, finishes the year on a high? That would be kind of interesting. And if I'm honest, that would be a bit of a turnaround for me, because my view was that we were more likely to sort of get a crack of this and a sort of drift a little bit lower. But it appears that everyone's getting a little bit of end of year giddiness, and that's what's pumping us a little bit higher there on the DAX at the moment. If you look at FTSE, FTSE weekly chart, we had run, okay, and we pulled back, okay, here, into the sort of the budget. We kind of drifted, we pushed a little bit higher, but last week wasn't exactly, I wouldn't exactly say that filled people with confidence. My own view is that the whilst the Chancellor will not and would probably not have been resigning, and the fact that she's running an inquiry into how much leaking went on in the run up to the budget, which is kind of like being allowed to mark her own homework. My own view is that I think that the way markets will get their revenge on it is by, we will start to see sort of just a lack of investment coming into the UK. That's what I think will happen. I think those funds will go elsewhere. And I think that might be something that we see in a bit of a drag in the FTSE over the next couple of months. So that's what I'll be sort of looking at and watching over the next few weeks and months. So, and if you look at that on the daily chart, okay, on the daily chart there, okay, we had an evening star formation. We bounced once again off the daily 50, really nice bounce. But if you just look at that doesn't exactly, here we are, the kind of after the budget, that doesn't exactly look like it's very enthusiastic. Now, of course, we're expecting Mr. Bailey to cut the interest rates here in the UK next week. But even that, will that be enough? I would just be watching this daily 50. It acted as really nice support there. We're kind of drifting our way in there, 9,700, drifting around there. Is it going to continue to be support? It's been really nice, but I bought that, okay, back earlier back in October, but I wonder whether it'll do it there. As I said, will there just be a case of like a little bit of a drift in terms of investment into the UK stocks and stuff, and will that what we see reflected there? So keep an eye on that. Quick look at commodities. Gold weekly chart. 4,000 acted as great support, and we're still push up there. I would look at last week's weekly candle as a bit of a indecision spinning top there, okay? As I said, lots of central bankers speaking and people will be keen to understand what the score is. Daily chart, as I say, my view would be kind of, it's a little bit, let's just draw these in here, a little bit of a coil up in front of FOMC, okay? It'll have an impact on the dollar, and that impact on the dollar will have an impact on gold, okay? So, no surprise to see us kind of sort of coiling up there in front of all of these major central bankers' announcements. Silver, we talked about, didn't we, last week? That continues to just hammer its way higher, isn't it? That's just quite a shocker. I think most people are expecting it to sort of drift its way to 60, that big round number. In the same way 50 it pivoted around for a while, I think most people are still expecting it to head towards 60. That's really been quite some move in that sense. Bitcoin, if I look at that weekly chart, we've kind of come our way down here, right? So I would look at that as we're pivoting around 90,000. And as I said, I think people are happy with that because I think a lot of people are expecting a much deeper move, but actually, yeah, of course, that could be, just a bearish flag. But I think part of this will have to do with people's their risk appetite. Okay, so we're pivoting around 90,000 on the daily. That's where the 20-period moving average is as well. Okay, so I think, as I said, people are happy that it didn't drop further than it was, because actually what you could see, the sort of first 2 or 3 weeks of November, was quite some significant drop lower, and I think people are quite happy that it's that has not continued in that sense. Okay, let us have a quick look at the FX pairs. We'll have a quick look at dollar, Aussie dollar, and sterling. Okay, we might overrun just a little bit this week, but as I said, lots going on this week, lots for us to talk about and to cover. So, this is US dollar profile. So Aussie dollar, Euro dollar, pound dollar, dollar Swiss, Kiwi dollar, dollar Canadian, dollar yen, and dollar index, and that's on the weekly chart. Let's go straight to the dollar index on the weekly chart. As we said, we scraped a close above 100 there a couple of weeks ago, but as the likelihood of rate cuts, okay, has increased, you can see the impact that has had on the dollar as well, how that's drifted its way down. The daily chart, we talked about it here. This is like a 3-bar breakout for me. Okay, this is diamonds, 3-bar breakout. Holding above 100 until we weren't, and now here we are at the 50. And it's no surprise to me that you've got price. Okay, you've got the 200 coming down, the 50 coming up, the 20 sloping down, and price. This is all coiling up in front of the FOMC on Wednesday. That's what we're looking at. So, yep. Very short-term trades might be okay, but as a swing trade, I wouldn't be putting any dollar positions on, okay, until after, okay, until sort of Thursday at the earliest for myself. But that's what I see there. That's kind of the coil building up there. That's kind of a little bit reflected by that kind of dollar weakness has given a little bit of euro strength. We can see there euro's above it's above its dailies 50s, and actually it's kind of that's working its way up in terms of where we saw dollar coiling up. Euros seems to be kind of sort of drifting a little bit higher than that, and I think that euro strength is coming at the it's coming at the basically the at the expense of dollar weakness there. Aussie, we're going to look at the moment, okay. Swiss franc, dollar Swiss franc, okay, is just it's a little bit. That's probably more of a coil there, isn't it? I would suggest there you've got the 200, you've got the 50, and you've got price in the middle and around the 20. Okay, that is just, to me, that just looks like excuse my drawings there. Oops, that's a terrible drawing, but you get the gist. In terms of prices coiling up until we get a decision, because as I said, you've got FOMC, and then on Thursday morning you've got SNB, and although people aren't expecting Swiss National Bank to make a move, it's not been unknown for them to basically put the cat amongst the pigeons, or for people to make different choices once they hear what the Americans have to say there. All right, so that's dollar. Let's have a look at Aussie. Okay, so remember, Aussie's powered its way to the top of the STAM. So there's Aussie dollar, Aussie yen, pound Aussie, Aussie Canadian, Aussie Swiss, Euro Aussie, Aussie Kiwi, and ASX. So, Aussie against the US dollar, you can see that's been a strong move, hasn't it? Aussie against Japanese yen, daily chart, that's been a strong move. Euro, okay, which is at the second, okay, Euro has weakened against the sort of Aussie. The Aussie against the Swiss franc. This was a nice move here because we had this double bottom with a daily bullish engulfing candle, and we've just, as I said, that Swiss franc has weakened, Aussie has strengthened there. Okay, the interesting thing is that it's been kind of a bit of a mixed picture against the sort of New Zealand dollar. And invariably, we've had Canadian dollar strengthening at the end of last week, but once again, also sterling, okay, is weakening against the Aussie dollar as well. So that's why I have profiles set up like this, so I can take a quick look at the currency, how it's doing against the majors. All right, its majors and minor partners, to give me a quick idea of where's that strength and where's that weakness. And certainly that price action is just, it's just confirming that kind of that Aussie strength that the Aussie strength we're seeing there. And finally, let's finish off with a little bit on sterling, as always. Okay, so what I've got here is pound against dollar, pound against yen, euro sterling, pound Swiss, pound Aussie, pound Canadian, pound Kiwi, and the FTSE. Right. So FTSE we've looked at. We've seen that kind of. We have seen the dollar weakness. So of course, hence why we've also seen a bit of sterling strength there. We talked a couple of weeks ago about it was coiling up in front of the budget. No real surprise there. Bit of a double bottom, breaks out of it. Okay, and we worked our way up there. But I'd say the last couple of days, people are starting to that sterling strength to kind of sort of kind of ebbing a little bit. I would sort of suggest there in terms of cable. When we look at pound against yen has just continued to work up. And that is that yen weakness. Okay, sterling, not necessarily sterling strength, just yen weakness. And that's what we've seen there. Pound against Swiss franc, we saw just a beautiful turnaround on Aussie against the Swiss franc, but that also happened here. Sterling against the Swiss franc, what had been in a sort of downtrend for most of the year, reversed its way up there. In a daily way, this is kind of like, an inverse head and shoulders there, okay, that we're going with that sort of sloped neckline. That's what we've seen there. That's what we've been working with. As we said, this month you've had sterling weakening against the Aussie, sterling weakening against the Kiwi, sterling, considerably weakening against the Canadian dollar as well. When we look at euro sterling to finish ourselves off, it's an interesting one because we had a real shove of euro strength, or more so sterling weakness, and then we've just kind of put in I would look at that as a bit of a head and shoulders there, okay, and we are now beneath that neckline, beneath the 50, and what I want to see is, can we stay beneath? If we stay beneath that 50. If we flip that 50, well, then, I'd be looking for us to sort of drift our way down to around about 86.50. That's what I'd be working with. Or maybe it pops up again and just runs into the 20 and forms once again, all right, another lower high. Okay, so, we're at a point where it's going to have to make a decision what it wants to do. So you might just want to add that to your watch list and see how that particularly plays out over the next week or so. Okay, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. All right, apologies we overran a little bit, but as always, I'm just trying to cram in as much as I possibly can for you during our sessions. I hope you found that useful. I hope that's given you a little bit of help, a little bit of insight that you can work with and utilize. As I said, it's a big week. It's a busy week, okay? So make sure you're on top of the news flow. Make sure you're on top of your order flow. Have yourself a fabulous trading week, and I will look forward to speaking to you soon. Many thanks, everybody. Cheers.